I hope for Darryn Peterson's sake, just to kind of put an end to that narrative that he is able to come out, he is able to stay healthy the rest of the year, and he's able to have some of the moments that sort of Kansas fans hope and expect that he'll have and en route to a really good season.
Pay heed all who enter and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer and I'm Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, please go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You can also find us on audio, Apple, and Spotify. Subscribe there. If you're on YouTube, you can like the video. You can share a comment. We love hearing from great KU fans. Yes, we do read your comments, so please thank you if you do share them, and if you haven't, share a comment. You can also use the 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify on our audio platforms. But I will say, you'll definitely want to be subscribed on YouTube because that's where we do our live shows, and we will have a live show coming up on Sunday afternoon for KU and Missouri. We're going to be talking about KU and Missouri and Darryn Peterson on today's show, but we're going to be live on Sunday afternoon after the game. So if you can't make it for whatever reason, it's in Kansas City, come join us for the live show after the fact on Sunday afternoon. And the best way to make sure that you know when we go live is to subscribe, because then you'll be notified when we're live on Sunday afternoon. So before we dive into Darryn Peterson, Bill Self spoke this morning on Friday morning as we record. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about KU and Missouri. Before we dive into all that, just off the top, kind of a little bit of a news dump here on the KU football side of things. With the season being over, you're starting to see some players announce intention to enter the transfer portal. One important thing to keep in mind is the NCAA changed the calendar this year, so the transfer portal does not open until January 2nd, and it's open for a 2-week period in early January. So when you see guys posting, tweeting, or reports of players entering the transfer portal, just know, it's at this point, it is guys announcing that they are intending to enter the transfer portal when it opens. So it's not really officially official until that window opens. But
except for D2 guys who technically do not have a portal, like
right, there are
D2, D3, NAIA guys, like they do not have a portal window, and so, like, for instance, Kansas already has a portal signee.
Yep,
for this class, and
Gabriel
Conde, yeah, sorry, and it's he is signed and in. He was a Division II guy, didn't have the portal window, but yeah, sorry to cut you off on that, Nick.
No, yeah, I appreciate that, because honestly, it can be confusing, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a complete expert in all the ins and outs of how it works. So thank you. But yeah, for D1 guys, for FCS guys, it's January 2nd. It'll open up for KU to get active in terms of getting players. But again, you'll see guys are announcing, and that was kind of what I was going to get to, which is we already have 2 KU players of note that have announced intentions to enter the transfer portal. The biggest one being Johnny Thompson, running back for Kansas, was at this stage looking to be running back 2 heading into 2026, presumably behind Harry Stewart. You also have Justin Thurman, but he's entering the portal. Came from California, never really, I think, got his full opportunities at Kansas. You know, Kansas ended up kind of recruiting over some of those guys with some of the transfer portal guys they got, including LeSean Williams. So he enters the portal. So I was anticipating Kansas was already probably going to get at least 1 transfer portal running back. Now maybe you're looking at potentially wanting more. I know you're really high on Justin Thurman. Obviously, Harry Stewart, I think, is the guy with a big upside as well for that room. But Johnny Thompson is the first, I would say, real notable name for Kansas that is going to be transferring out of the program.
Yeah, and they have played running backs early when they've been good enough to, right? They started Devin Neal as a freshman, not like right away. It took him a few games until he was kind of cemented at running back 1. But the reason I say that is Corey Amakri could be in that discussion as well. But you're absolutely right, Nick. I think when Katie Jones flipped on National Signing Day to Oklahoma State, that kind of opened up a spot for 1 running back in the transfer portal, because if I remember right, and I could be remembering things wrong, if I remember right, they would then need basically a transfer to get to the same number of running backs they had this past year. So with Johnny Thompson being out, you would think there's at least potential that they would take, maybe 2 of those guys just because of the fact that that would then get you back to the same number of running backs that they had last year. Of course, you can wind up with more running backs you had last year, less running backs. You can decide to go whichever way you want from that, but I would expect them certainly to hit the portal for at least one. And in this case, with Thompson going, it would not surprise me to see them pick up a second.
And by the way, KD Jones, who referenced, reflipped. He flipped originally from Oklahoma State to Kansas after Oklahoma State fired Mike Gundy. Then Oklahoma State hires Eric Morris, and Jones ends up flipping back to Oklahoma State. So kind of a funny little flip-flop there from Jones. But he's a really solid player. But I know you're very high on Corey Mockery as well at Michigan. And by the way, this gives us a chance also to plug, if you missed earlier in the week, National Signing Day was on Wednesday. Kevin did a show here. It's on our YouTube feed and our audio feed for Verbal Commitment, to talking about all things recruiting for KU on National Signing Day. Had a chance to talk with the general manager for KU, Rob Ianello. So if you're more interested in some of the high school players that Kansas has brought in, I would highly encourage you to check out that show that, again, is on our feed from earlier this week on Wednesday. So check that out if you're wanting to get a little bit more of a deep dive into exactly what KU has brought in with this high school recruiting class. And I think that's not insignificant because, Kevin, after this past season in 2025, you're now going into 2026 with all Leipold players.
Yes.
Everybody, this is now a complete Lance Leipold recruited roster from high school, transfer portal, now it's totally Lance Leipold. So that's something that I think is also maybe important to keep in mind as Kansas looks to build for 2026. The other name for Kansas that did announce to enter the transfer portal actually came out on Friday as we're recording this is Ja'Cory Stewart. He was a linebacker out of Georgia for Kansas, a guy that hadn't seen the field at all really for KU, and I don't think was really in line to see much of the field either in 2026. So I guess a depth piece that you lose there. Again, linebacker is going to be once again a position of intrigue for Kansas because Trey Lathan has a year. Can you keep Trey Lathan? Joe Sipp could potentially be a guy who redshirts and comes back. You have a John Kamara, so there's some pieces there, but you do lose one guy who might have been a depth guy for 2026 and beyond. But once again, another position group that I would think Kansas would be interested in possibly dipping their fingers into the transfer portal for a player there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at Logan Brantley has played a little bit out there, and then a guy that I really liked as a high schooler, and we heard a lot of positive buzz about this past year's Malachi Curvey, and it would not surprise me to see him jump up into that linebacker rotation as well. But yeah, if there's a good linebacker out there that you like, I think they have guys who can fit different roles. Trey Lathan, at least theoretically, could fill the Trey Lathan role again. I think Joe Sipp, when you have sort of the two almost middle linebackers out there, would fit that really well. And I think, Nick, when you have a linebacker sort of slide down and play that edge spot a lot like Bengali Kamara did, I think that's where John Kamara is so intriguing. And I think when you look at what Kamara did this year, some intriguing things for John. And John is also a guy, Nick, that I feel like has taken major steps forward every year he's been at KU. And so he'll be one of my sort of circled guys for the spring, he and Curvey both, and then seeing where they're at going into fall too.
By the way, Curvey made a nice special teams play in the last game of the season against Utah on a kickoff return, if you recall. So maybe that's a little bit of a taste of what he could be bringing for Kansas in 2026 and beyond. Not exactly totally related, Kevin, but I think it's probably relevant to talk about here for Kansas in terms of recruiting and the transfer portal and all that stuff is what's happening at the school to the west, which is K-State, and their coaching change with Chris Kleiman retiring, Colin Klein coming in. I'm just curious real quick for your quick reaction to that, and maybe if that does impact any sort of recruiting at the high school level and or the transfer portal when you've got a regime change in Manhattan happening this offseason.
The most important people for recruiting are staffers and assistant coaches. And so I think Colin Klein is probably going to be a pretty good recruiting head coach, but it's kind of impossible to know what that staff will look like from that standpoint without knowing, hey, who are the coordinators, who are going to be the assistant coaches that are the rainmakers that go out and try and win recruiting battles, and then what do those staffs look like? When you talk to some of the recruits around the state this year that wound up picking Kansas, they singled out Greg Schwarzkopf as the reason why. And if you're on this show watching, you're like, I'm not really sure who Greg Schwarzkopf is. that's the point that I'm making, is that a lot of times it is some of the behind the scenes guys that play major impacts in these recruiting situations. And so I think it's tough to say without that. I will say Colin Klein was a pretty good recruiter as a position coach himself. He's a really genuine person, Nick, and I think that comes across on the trail as somebody that he's not doing a sales job, right? Like, he's building a legitimate relationship, and I think he's a pretty high character guy from that standpoint. And so depending on how he assembles his staff, I think will answer a lot of that. But you are starting to see, the odd guy transfer out. I think they've had, 5 or 6 now.
They've had some guys
out.
Yep.
Braden Lofton was one of the guys. Kua Moss, I think, was the biggest guy that's transferred out. He did some really good things for him this year. I think he was the guy that had the pick that helped them seal the UCF game. And so they are losing a few guys here and there. But again, you mentioned the window doesn't actually open until January. And so if these are guys that Klein watches the tape and says, hey, I want that guy back, you've got time to kind of pull the rope and get him back in. And so I do think it is worth watching what's going on to the West, but I think we'll have probably more answers a week from now than probably we do right now. And I know that's not satisfactory to anybody. Everybody wants me to just go in hard and give a take, but I think that once we see what the staff looks like, we'll have a little bit better idea.
Well, and I think it's relevant because this is sort of the first season that Kansas under Lance Leipold has made real significant inroads in the state of Kansas,
Sure.
Right? So the fact that you now do have a guy going back to Kansas State, and there's going to be presumably a major staff shakeup there, that does certainly affect local recruiting, I think, for Kansas wanting to, challenge Kansas State for getting a lot of the top players in the state of Kansas. So also
Wichita particularly, like, I'm not trying to cut you off or extend this, but Nick, you're a Mays kid. Kansas does not typically recruited Wichita well. They get Bryson Hayes 2 classes ago from Mays to kind of maybe open things up a little bit. This year you get Hunter Higgins, Mays South. You're able to go to Wichita Northwest, the powerhouse there, and get Jalen Mason. And so Kansas is starting to kind of maybe open the door to Wichita a little bit, and that's going to be one of the places in particular, I think, to watch over the next few classes. Is Kansas able to keep that door open, or is Colin Klein able to kind of build a cement wall around that city again?
Yeah, so something to watch out west to see how that develops as it pertains to Kansas as well. So, but as you said, plenty of more time to discuss that. And again, we'll be keeping an eye out on the transfer portal as it gets closer. We intend to have plenty of coverage of that, who KU brings in, who other guys that may be leaving as well, the program. So we'll have plenty more updates on that. For the rest of the show, we're going to switch gears and talk KU basketball. Bill Self gave an update on Darryn Peterson earlier this morning on Friday ahead of KU's game against Missouri. We'll get to that. We'll also talk about the KU-Missouri game. We'll do all that coming up next.
What's up, guys? It is Benny Heiss, KCSN betting analyst, and Missouri, your moment is finally here. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is now live right here in the state. So now you can make every game so much more exciting with same-game parlays, money lines, props, and more, all from your phone, and it's all safe, secure, and easy to use. And listen, we know fans in the state of Missouri know game day, whether it's the tailgates, the noise, the passion, and now with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bring that same energy to every snap, every touchdown, and every win. Right now, new Missouri customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. There's no waiting, no nonsense, just pure action powered by America's top-rated sportsbook app. So here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code KCSN. Code KCSN. Remember, new Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. That's code KCSN. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Bonus bets expire 7 days after they're issued. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, please see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. If you've not already, please go ahead and subscribe on Apple and Spotify and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Subscribe there, like the video, and also share a comment to share your thoughts. We love to hear from great KU fans And we are going to be live on Sunday afternoon after the KU Missouri game. We're going to do a little bit more preview of KU Missouri coming up later on in the show. But let's go ahead and get to, I think, what most people are most interested in, Kevin, here, and most curious about, which is the ongoing saga surrounding Darryn Peterson and what was initially described as cramps. Then it turned out it was a hamstring strain. He's obviously missed quite a bit of time for Kansas now. It felt like after the Players Era tournament that, hey, UConn would have been a great opportunity to get it back. Bill Self, we didn't get a chance to talk about this in our postgame show. Bill Self, in his postgame press conference after the game, basically said, hey, Darryn Peterson's like 95%, but don't want to play him at 100%. So this kind of back and forth song and dance continues. And obviously now he's had more time, and now Kansas is preparing for what KU fans, I think, feel like is a big game against Missouri. Obviously, Missouri got the better of Kansas last year in Columbia. This year, the game is in Kansas City. So, I think there's still a lot on the line, right? Bragging rights against your rival. You want to, secure that back from Missouri. So before we dive specifically into everything about this and sort of give our thoughts on where Darryn Peterson is at, Bill Self this morning kind of provided an update and a little bit of back and forth with some reporters at his press conference. So I want to play some audio. Here's everything that Bill Self had to say early this morning on Friday.
As usual, do you have an update on Darryn? And
yeah, he's practiced the last 2 days. So he should be available, unless, he has a setback between now and game time. But we're approaching it like he's available.
Does he run the court full speed scrimmage situations at practice?
Yeah,
just like anybody else?
We wouldn't put him out there unless he was full speed. So, yeah, he's doing that for sure.
I know you guys have invested a lot of time in him, and just from a selfish standpoint, do you look forward to coaching him again and getting him out on the court and being? I mean, I know it's.
Do I look forward to coaching him? I mean, he's great.
Yeah,
and he's tried his ass off to get back sooner. If it wasn't for his 4 times a day treatment and everything else going on, maybe he would be out longer. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to having him back out there, but more so for him than anything else.
Has it been tough trying to ascertain what exactly constitutes him being 100%? Exactly how ready he needs to be in order to play in the game?
I think it's a long season, and from my vantage point, totally symptom-free would be the thing I would say that would constitute putting him out there. If he's not totally symptom-free, I'm not going to put him out there. It's not a conference, even though it's important, but it's not a conference still.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there, yes. Obviously. First and foremost, seems like Darryn Peterson is in fact going to play on Sunday. That's essentially, I think, what Bill Self was kind of getting out there. Again, barring any setback. That was from this morning, Friday morning. We're recording this on Friday afternoon, so presumably on the rest of today and Saturday, if he's good to go. That was sort of the impression that I got. That seems to be, I think, what the impression most people got, which is Darryn Peterson's going to be available on Sunday and play against Missouri. So that's the positive of it. But again, there was a lot more to unpack there. But I guess just initially, Kevin, let's assume Darryn Peterson is going to play Sunday, like Bill Self said. We had this conversation, I think, before the UConn game, but just what can you expect from him, do you think, coming back?
I think a big part of it is him saying, hey, I'm not going to put him out there unless he's symptom-free and 100%, because I think, one of the things that people took maybe negatively after the UConn game was when Self said, hey, he's 95%, and that spawned all sorts of sort of ridiculous comments like, hey, I can't believe he's sitting out games at 95% and all those things. It's not that Darryn Peterson doesn't want to be out there. He's not the one at the end of the day, I don't think, saying no. And I think Self, going a little bit more into, hey, if he's not going through his 4 times a day treatment, he's going full speed of practice, getting up and down the court, all of those different things, it does show that Darryn Peterson is putting in the effort to be out there. And so, Nick, could you expect some rust? I think certainly, he hasn't been out on the basketball court that much, but at the same time, I think the fact that he's had, like a week or so of practice now, maybe
he's actually, if you believe Bill Self, he's actually had longer than that. That's what he was practicing before the UConn game. So we're talking about, at least, as far as we're aware of, probably 10 days or so of practice.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like maybe like Saturday, Sunday to Saturday, Sunday or whatever. But
Yeah.
but either way, I think, it might not take him as long to find his sea legs if he's been going through and doing all of those things. And I think one of the interesting parts about it, and I know we'll get into the X's and O's like we always do at some point, but Nick, Missouri does not defend the 3-point line well at all. And I think when you're asking specifically what can we expect with Darryn Peterson, I think the two things you want to see is, obviously he's got a lot more game than this, but I think you'd like to see him come out, hit a few outside shots to kind of help in an area where this Kansas team has been lacking. And I think the other part is, Nick, is he able to go out there, drive confidently to be able to create shots around the arc for other players, the drive and kick, the different things that he does really well there. Those are going to be sort of the two things that I'm going to be watching on Sunday if he does play is how's he shooting? Is he still knocking down some of those shots that he was making beforehand? And is he feeling comfortable enough on that hamstring to be able to get downhill, get into the lane, and then create plays for other people?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add to that is what you said at the end there, which is there's a mental aspect to it, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have a bad ankle, bad hamstring, whatever the injury may be, there has to be a mental aspect of understanding you can trust, that whatever the injury you're dealing with has gone away, right? And that you are able to then go out and fully do what you want to do on the court. So I think that's maybe something to consider as well, is that, hey, Darryn Peterson has to be able to trust himself and trust in, the rehab process that he's gone through, that he can go out there and play at the high level that he wants to play at. And we've talked about this obviously for the past month or so, since as this injury sort of saga has continued. And, my initial take was actually quite similar to what Bill Self said in that clip, which is, it's November, it's late November, early December. Do you want it to be a situation where you rush him back and then it turns into a day-to-day thing for the entire season? Or do you want to just say, okay, you know what, let's make sure that he is, in the words of Bill Self, symptom free now, and then that way you can just say all gas, no brakes once conference play hits, and then you obviously go on and hopefully then go on to the NCAA tournament and so on and so forth. I agree with that premise, and I supported that premise, I think, but the 95% thing kind of threw me off a little bit. Like, I think it's one thing if it's like 60% or 70%. Now, I will also say the whole percentage thing is like also kind of stupid, because you can't really put a percentage on how healthy somebody is.
Oh, sure.
But in my mind, I was thinking, well, if he's like 70% or whatever that means, sure, I understand. 95% with UConn at home, that one stings a little bit for me, because I think even if he was 95%, whatever that may have been, Kansas maybe wins that game. But again, I understand the premise, and I think that was where the frustration came from. It's like, man, okay, if it's one thing, if it's like, again, 60, 70%, you don't want to potentially re-injure it or aggravate it, right? But like, you're playing a top 5 team at home and you want to win that game. So, and now you're playing a bitter rival in Kansas City, a game that certainly matters in the eyes of fans and the fan base. And, they want to win this game badly too. And so you hope that he'll be able to play, and it sounds like he will, but that was where I kind of lost the plot a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better term on it. But I think at this point, if he comes back on Sunday, maybe that kind of wipes that away, especially if Kansas goes out and beats Missouri. That'll absolve some of that. And also, I will just point out, we've entered the period of the season where then this is the last period that you have this. You're going to have quite a bit of time between games. I mean, Kansas played on Tuesday to Sunday. They're going to play on Sunday. Their next game won't be until the following Saturday. You got 6 days there. Then they're going to play another game 4 or 5 days after that. But then they have a big stretch where they don't have any games. And in fact, I think after they play Townsend, I believe they've got 9 days before the start of conference play. So this would be, I think, make the most sense even to get him back out there if he is, again, symptom free in the words of Bill Self, to see how he does, with the understanding that you do still have quite a bit of time in case anything happens, that you can get him back to where you want him to be before conference play starts.
Yeah, the percentage thing is BS. Like you're not lying about that. And I think
Just say it, it's stupid. Yeah.
I think one of the better ways to put it is, like, Darryn Peterson had been practicing in full the few days prior to UConn. They checked him out on Tuesday morning. Now, obviously, you and I were not in the room, but 95%, let's just say, could equate to, well, we just saw this guy practice in full twice, but he's got some swelling on it today. Like, let's not put him out there. And so I think that's the tough thing about it is people want to say, well, if you're 95%, you should be out there. The issue isn't, would he be able to play well at 95%? Because obviously, if you are actually 95%, you would probably be able to play pretty well. And by the time you get into February and March, Nick, pretty much nobody on your team is even playing at 95%. Everybody's got something, a toe injury or an ankle, or, oh, my knee's bothering me. My back is sore today. And so I think the 95% kind of did Darryn a little bit dirty from that perspective. And the issue isn't, hey, could he have played at 95%? The issue is, if you put him out there at 95%, he's not fully healed. And then you have something that takes him back down to 65%. And then you're starting this whole process back over. And so with hamstrings kind of being like backs, where, it's really easy to re-aggravate, it's really easy to kind of do all those things, I don't have a problem with them saying he's not fully healed, let's not put him out there. But I do think the 95% maybe opened Peterson up to a little bit more criticism from people that maybe wasn't fair to Darryn Peterson. It was because Self said this guy's 95%, and people are like, well, it's UConn. If you're 95%, like, get your ass out there.
Yeah, and I think that's been the irritating part of this process from the outside, is some of the comments have I think, led people to believe he is really close to playing, but it's been that way for 2 weeks now, basically,
Sure.
and he's haven't had a chance to see him out there yet. So but I do feel like, Kevin, this is we need to put the disclaimer here now that we are not doctors. We just play them on a podcast.
That's true.
Only one of us have any sort of medical experience or background. I just want to make that clear for this section of the show, for this portion of the show. But yeah, it's obviously been, I think, a little bit of an irritating process over the past couple of weeks with sort of where he's at. But I think, again, a lot of that can be smoothed over by him simply playing, right? And going out and, giving Kansas a strong performance en route to a win over Missouri, right? Because you obviously want to beat Missouri anytime you play them under any circumstance, in any sport, any arena. You absolutely want to beat those clowns. So, all right, before we shift into more talking about and previewing that game between Kansas and Missouri, any final thoughts on the Darryn Peterson situation?
No, I hope he gets out there, because I really do think that he's been done dirty by this a little bit, given that all the conversations that we've had, Nick, and the people that we've talked to. Darryn Peterson's a competitor, and he is the sort of guy that, is going to fight. And if it's, if he gets a high ankle sprain in February, he's not the type of guy that I expect, he's going to avoid games because of his draft stock. And it's really unfortunate that there are certain people that have kind of taken that angle through this whole thing of, oh, well, he's sitting out, or, I think that's the unfortunate thing. And so I hope, for Darryn Peterson's sake, just to kind of put an end to that narrative, that he is able to come out, he is able to stay healthy the rest of the year, and he's able to have some of the moments that sort of Kansas fans hope and expect that he'll have, and en route to a really good season.
Yeah, 100% echo that. Again, everything that we've seen from speaking to Darryn Peterson directly a couple times between the two of us, speaking with people around him, like, yeah, the dude is a gamer. The guy wants to play. And I would just add to what you said there at the end about the draft stock is, look around college basketball. Like, it would behoove Darryn Peterson to play, because otherwise, if he's not playing, other guys are getting the headlines, and other guys might be jumping over him potentially for that potential number one pick, which is kind of what the standard was set for him heading into the season. So yeah, I think that's a bit of a ridiculous argument to make, to be quite honest. But yes, I agree with you. I think bottom line is, a lot of that can be smoothed over with just simply him going out and doing what he does best, which is playing basketball.
If he scores 28 in a win over North Carolina in the Elite Eight, like this will be a distant memory for everybody. And so that's what I'm hoping for him is, this becomes something that people don't really talk about. How many people talk about like Remy Martin's won't he play from his year anymore? It almost never gets mentioned anymore. He's considered one of the heroes of a national championship team.
And by the way, that injury saga, for people that have a short-term memory, lasted significantly longer than what this has been and spilled over even into conference play and obviously even into March, basically.
And frustrated Bill Self a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. So, the situation as we sit here on December 5th seems a lot more tame than that did. But again, just simply go out and play, and I think people will be happy with the product. So, speaking of that, we'll have a chance to dive more deeper into what Darryn Peterson could mean on the court against Missouri and a little bit more of a deeper preview. We'll do all that cut out next.
My name is Terrell Jolly. A lot of people call me TJ, founder and CEO of Integrity Capital Management. So Integrity Capital Management originally started out as a property management firm, but we slowly transitioned to what is described as an incremental development firm that's focused on situational housing. I know most people say affordable, but we believe in creating housing for people that are actually in need and built to the end user. I believe everyone needs a home because when you have home, you have hope. The reality is that when you're building a business, one thing you don't think about is like what a true banking relationship means. And, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Debbie early on in my career when I was just trying to get going. And as a small business, it's really challenging at times because people don't understand the concept or not believe the longevity because you're just getting started. But Debbie was willing to take a chance on me, be patient with me. I almost look at it like a grassroots initiative. She's seen and believe what I'm about. Anybody that's really true about their business and want to get some things done, I would definitely trust hands down Emprise because Deb's team, along with Aaron and Jackie and all the amazing people that work behind the scenes, even from the treasury side, I would say, hey, give them an opportunity because you won't be disappointed and you will actually be in hands that actually somebody care and that will see you from start to finish.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Once again, if you have not already, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. And on YouTube, that's where we do our live shows. And we are planning to have a live show reacting to KU and Missouri on Sunday afternoon, immediately following the conclusion of the game. Best way for you to know when we do that is to subscribe so that you're notified when we go live on Sunday afternoon. Speaking of Missouri, yes, Kansas and Missouri, Sunday at 12 o'clock at the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City. This is a series that, and Bill Self actually mentioned this as well, Kansas and Missouri played home and home and home and home, right? And the idea was to have the series bookended by two neutral site games in Kansas City. What ended up happening was COVID, and so the 2020 was supposed to be the first year, but it didn't happen. So now that's why they're playing in Missouri this year, or that's why they're playing in Kansas City, I should say, this year. And Missouri got the better of Kansas last year. Quite frankly, it was one of the uglier games of the season for Kansas for a good majority of it before KU tried to make a mad comeback, but it was too little, too late to lose to Missouri. So you want to get this one badly to get to avenge that. But I will say this, Kevin, also, to be quite frank with you, that team, there's only one guy that played in the game last year that's still on the team, and that's Floyd Badunga.
Yeah.
That's Floyd Badunga. You had guys like Marco Jackson and Jamar McDowell on roster, but they didn't play in that game. So Badunga is the only one that has the experience of actually playing in that game last year for Kansas. So different team, obviously, for KU coming into this one against Missouri. For Missouri, they're 8-1 on the year, but I will say their schedule pretty weak. If you look at the KenPom rankings of the 8 teams they've beaten, Kevin, only one is in the top 225. That was Minnesota that they beat back on November 12th. Every other opponent they play that they've beaten this season in KenPom is lower than 240 in KenPom. Howard, Southeast Missouri, TMI, Prairie View A&M, South Dakota, South Carolina State.
Southeast Missouri is their second best win.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Southeast Missouri is their second best win. So it hasn't been exactly the murderer's row of a schedule that Missouri has played. Then they played Notre Dame on Tuesday. And you remember Notre Dame? Kansas just played them at the Players era, and Kansas beat them. Missouri did not. They lost against Notre Dame 76-71. So you could kind of look at this two ways. You could say, oh, Missouri's 8-1. They're off to a strong start. They've been good. They've scored a lot of points in a lot of their games. But on the flip side, you could say, well, the only real tough opponent they played this season, the only top 70 Ken Palm team they played this season in Notre Dame, they lose. So a little bit of a mixed bag for them. Now they come into this game against Kansas on the neutral site, and this is a Missouri team that's their MO this season has been to be really strong on offense. They are top 25 on Ken Palm in offense. The defense has not been great. You mentioned, Kevin, specifically the 3-point defense has been bad. Yeah, they are in the bottom half of the country in 3-point defense in terms of percentage.
That's 3-point percentage.
Yeah.
3-point rate, they're giving up over 49% of the shots against them are coming from behind the arc, which is 354th in the country. So they're giving up a ton of threes right now.
Yeah. And if you remember right from last year, the thing about this Missouri team was they had a lot of size, had quite a bit of length. This team from Missouri this year similarly does have a decent amount of size and length again. It kind of starts with Mark Mitchell, who has been their best player so far this season, averaging 18 points per game. He's been really, really strong for them. Jacob Cruz is a transfer that you need to keep an eye on from UT Martin. Kevin, he's shooting 49% from three.
I was like, do not let that guy shoot. He's got 25 makes already, too.
Yes.
I mean, he has been.
Yeah, 49% on high volume.
When that dude comes on the court, like, do not let, and he hasn't started a game for him yet. So, I mean, he comes off the bench.
Yeah, it's kind of like their 6-man score.
Yeah, but when he comes on the court, like, locate that dude at all times, transition, every chance you get. He needs to not have a second of breathing room.
This is a Missouri team that has a bit of a mixed bag of guys out of the transfer portal and players that have been on their roster for a couple of years now that have made impacts for them. Mentioned Mark Mitchell. Obviously, this is his second season at Missouri. A guy like Luke Northweather, who was previously at Oklahoma. Anthony Robinson, who's been with them, had a strong game against Kansas in 2024. He's also having a strong start to his season as well, shooting almost 40% from three. So, yeah, most college basketball rosters look this way nowadays, right? Where you've got a handful of guys that have been in your program and a handful of guys that you brought in as well. So what are you looking for in this game, Kevin? What are maybe some of your keys for Kansas in this one against Missouri?
Yeah, and Missouri is down a guy in this game. He's been out for a little bit. Stone is a guy that helps them out. He's a guy that's probably I think he was maybe their second leading scorer when he went out. He's a good shooter, and so they aren't going to be missing him for this one. But generally speaking, Nick, the biggest thing I'm looking for is just, and I know people, like to hear me cuss or whatever. It's the level of give a shit, right? Like, and I'm not saying that against this year's team because I think they have absolutely competed like dogs. But the last two games, really, Nick, when you think about it, the win at Allen Fieldhouse 2 years ago was kind of sleepy a little bit too, right? I mean, KU wound up winning, but it was a game that it felt like, well, KU's just kind of playing with its food a little bit. It wasn't a great performance. And then last year, the reason KU got buried to start was Kansas came out and it was like what they said on Rocky, where they said he doesn't know it's a damn show, in terms of, I think KU expected to come in and roll over Missouri again. Missouri came out with all kinds of fire and effort, and KU just was not engaged. And by the time they got engaged, like you said, they did, come back quite a bit to make it a game late and make some Missouri fans nervous, but it never should have been in that position. And so that's the single biggest thing I'm looking for in this one, Nick, is, we can talk about the X's and O's and how this guy matches up with that guy. And, will Kansas make outside shots against a team that gives them up a lot? But the single biggest thing that I'm watching for, Nick, is Kansas going to come into this knowing that's Missouri across from me? They're going to come and try and rip my heart out. I need to rip their heart out first.
Well, and the positive thing is that's sort of exactly what this team is, I think.
Yeah.
This iteration of Kansas in 2025 feels like they've got those guys, right? You've got the Melvin Councils. You've got those levels of players that clearly have that type of want to in them in a game like this, where I don't think we'll see a repeat of 2024, right? I don't think we'll see that happen again, where Kansas just kind of comes in and just maybe sort of expects Mizzou to lay down and then has to try to fight and claw late in the game to just get back into it. I would be shocked if that happens again in this game after what happened last year. And let's face it, Missouri basketball has been, was really bad in 23, which I think contributed to sort of the sleepiness of, as you described it, of KU and Allen Fieldhouse beating Missouri. But they've built a little bit more, right? Dennis Gates has built up a little bit. They win 22 games last year to make the NCAA tournament. They have a pretty highly rated, high school recruiting class coming in for 2026 as well. This year's team looks like they could be another team that potentially, challenges for an NCAA tournament berth. But the bottom line is, if you're Kansas and you have Final Four aspirations and beyond, this is a game you absolutely must win. And this is a game you absolutely must win, probably in emphatic fashion, right? Like, make a statement. This is your chance, I think, to sort of plant your flag, to erase the memory of 2024 and really assert yourself back into the conversation as being a top team. Because you look what happened against UConn, and it's like, okay, you were at home, you didn't have your star player, you were there against UConn, who's a top 5 team, but looks like a national title contender, you didn't close it out, right? So now you're back into this conversation of, well, okay, are you a top 20 team? Or are you a top 25 team? We'll see what Darryn Peterson brings when he comes back. But this seems like a game where you have a chance to maybe reinsert yourself into a bigger conversation about being a legitimate team that people need to keep an eye on when it comes to second, third weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there are some things that Kansas could do to kind of erase some demons in this one, and not just against Missouri, right? I think if Darryn Peterson comes out, plays really well, you just kind of take a deep breath, right? Because, it's, hey, you lost a close game that you competed against Duke with Darryn Peterson not there. You lost a close game against UConn without Darryn Peterson being there. If he comes out, plays really well, looks like Darryn Peterson, and you wind up, like you said, making a statement with a win in this game, I do think it erases kind of those defeats, at least in the minds of KU fans, and has you sort of on that positive trajectory of, okay, things are fine. They're trending in the right direction. And so I think it's a way to make a statement in a really positive direction that, you lost on Tuesday. Everybody would have liked to have won that one. And even without Darryn Peterson, you had your chances, but Peterson's back now, and Kansas is going to be a force to be reckoned with heading into conference season.
Bill Self said on Friday morning that he thought KU's defense was ahead of where he expected it to be at this stage of the season.
Agreed.
And that's, again, without a guy who maybe arguably could be your best defender in Darryn Peterson. Potentially, we saw KU against UConn switch 1 through 5, and we saw it be really pretty effective at times. Later in the game, it kind of fell off a little bit. UConn got some easy looks. Missouri is another team that is pretty big, pretty tall, so that'll be something to watch as it pertains to Flory, who against bigger guys has at times struggled this season. What can he do? And against UConn, Flory was, I think, kind of ineffective offensively, quite frankly. It didn't feel like he was able to get the ball effectively. It didn't feel like Kansas was able to get it to him in easy situations to score. He wasn't able to really utilize any of those post moves we've seen with him, but he'll be somebody to watch in this game as well. Again, hopefully stay out of foul trouble. Bryson Tiller's had a couple rough games after sort of his start to the season. I'd like to see him sort of rebuild some of that confidence as well in this game against Missouri, because this feels like a game where Tiller will need to play a little bit more with that size that Missouri can present. So as it pertains to KU switching against UConn, I mentioned they did it 1 through 5. Do you think they do that again in this game, or do you think Kansas may take a different approach defensively?
I think it could depend on personnel a little bit, because if Phillips is out there, you're probably not switching 1 through 5, because
that's the 7-footer. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a 7-foot guy that hasn't taken a 3-point attempt this year. So, I don't think you're probably going to switch off there. But when Northweather comes in, he's a guy that does shoot from the outside. And so maybe you do decide to switch 1 through 5 at that point. The other thing is, when Phillips goes out, their shot blocking kind of falls off a cliff a little bit. And so I'm interested to see, are they able to get Phillips in foul trouble? He's committing 5.3 fouls per 40 minutes right now. If they are, this could be a game where we look at it and say, man, this is a major bounce back for Fleury, because he might be able to run rampant in that situation. But I think the other thing is Missouri's guards turn you over so well, whether it's Robinson or Mack. I think both of those guys are just terrific with their hands. They jump passing lanes. With Darryn Peterson coming back and it being his first game back, KU is, at least theoretically, Kansas is going to have to take care of the ball in this one. And more specifically, Nick, Kansas is not going to be able to give up what we call pick sixes. And those are those live ball turnovers that result in transition buckets. I think, one, you don't want Missouri's offense, getting layups or things like that. But the other part is, Nick, when we started talking about Cruz and some of the other guys that can shoot, you don't want to be in transition situations where you're not able to locate a shooter on the secondary break and you're giving up good looks there. This is a Kansas team that, like you said, I do think the defense is ahead of where I expected it to be. I thought UConn's offense, I don't think it's the best in the country, but it may be the hardest to defend in the country in terms of the actions they run, the motions, the way they screen, and all the different things that they do. In Kansas, being able to switch and stay attached on those switches and rotate and do the different things that they did was ahead of where I thought it would be in that game. I thought, quite frankly, that UConn would give Kansas more trouble from that UConn offense. And so this is one where if your defense shows up to play on one end and you're not giving up pick sixes on the other end, I think Kansas puts itself in a really, really good spot.
Well, let me turn up the heat on you, Kevin. Make a prediction. Does Kansas get it done against Missouri?
Well, I will be interested to hear what Nick Palm has to say here in a minute. But yeah, Ken Palm has Kansas winning this game by 3. If, again, Ken Palm doesn't account for injuries either way. So it doesn't include Missouri's missing guy. It doesn't really include Darryn. It just says what your team has done to that point. And so if Darryn Peterson comes back, I like Kansas by more than a 3-pointer. I actually think that this is a game that Kansas could come out and really make a statement. Missouri's defense has really struggled this year. They've given up open looks. They've given up open looks from behind the arc. And Kansas could potentially be getting its best 3-point shooter back in this one. And so when you look at all of those different factors, I like Kansas to score high in this one because I think it will be a little bit higher scoring game. And so I'll say Kansas by 8, something like 82-74. What do you think?
Yeah, one other thing I'll add about Ken Palm is the more data, the better with it, right? And actually, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, you can correct me on this. It early in the season, it still pulls data from the previous season.
It does, yes.
Into creating what the numbers are. So
usually expectations, basically.
Yeah, so it takes about 15 to 20 games or so, I think. So basically, by the time you get to near the start of conference play or into conference play, before I start to look at Ken Palm and say, hey, this is really legitimate on this year's team. So I would just add in that little nugget as well. Yeah, Nick Palm has no respect for what Missouri has done so far this season. I mean, give me a break. They haven't even they've played the school of the blind, the school of the poor, and the school of the deaf. No offense to any of those schools, but yeah, Nick Palm thinks that Missouri is terrible. Obviously, Nick Palm predicts that Kansas is going to win this game, predicts that they're going to win huge. I think it'll be a double-digit win for Kansas. That's my prediction. So
there you go. I think Kansas is double-digit points better than Missouri. I won't disagree with that. I do think that, the rivalry aspect of it, however you want to put that part, maybe makes this a game that doesn't have quite as much separation as it might have been if this were, say, Kansas and a similarly talented West Virginia team rather than Missouri.
Sounds like Kev Palm agrees with Nick Palm. So how about that? Take that, Ken Palm, and take that, Missouri. Yeah, I'm going to pick Missouri. I'm going to pick Kansas to be.
It was good. You're going to pick Missouri. I was like, what the heck?
No, Freudian slip there. No, I would never pick Missouri in literally anything. I think it's it's misery, man. It's the butthole of the United States. So how about that? Yeah, Kansas is going to win by, I'll say I'll say 85-68.
Okay, so big time win.
Yes, that is my prediction. So, and I think Darryn Peterson's going to play, and I think he's going to play well. So that's my other prediction.
I also think he will play and play well. It would not surprise me if this was a quote unquote showcase Darryn Peterson game where you look at it at the end of it and he's got, like a 25, 5, and 7 or something in a big way.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I think I'll wrap it up for this edition of the show. Kevin, you got anything else to add for our great listeners?
No. If you have a chance to get out there, I didn't see. Is the game sold out?
I do not believe it has been sold out yet.
I don't think I've seen an announcement saying it was sold out. And so if you're on the fence and go catch the game, get back home in time for the Chiefs game, and you should be.
Yep, exactly.
You should be golden. Go out, support the Jayhawks, and maybe see the number 1 overall pick make his return.
Yep, it's a noon game, Kansas and Missouri. As you said, the Chiefs play later in the evening on Sunday, which could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing because the Chiefs suck. So I'll you know what? I'll leave the Chiefs commentary to our other cohorts here on KCSN. But I have some opinions about the Chiefs that probably shouldn't be aired here on the show at the end here. But yeah, that's going to do it for this edition of the Payee Podcast. Once again, please like, subscribe, and share a comment if you would like. And we will be live on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN Sunday afternoon after the game to react to it. Hopefully we get to talk about Darryn Peterson and what he does in this game for Kansas. And hopefully we're talking about a Kansas win. So for Kevin Flaherty, I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again on Sunday afternoon. Until then, see ya.